Well, good morning, everyone. Dina, thank you. Andrew and Wesley, Gabe, I'm really honored to be here. I'm with the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, the president and CEO, and I'm looking around the room with a lot of friends and colleagues that I get to work with and my colleagues get to work with every single day. And I was asked to just give a few opening remarks for what is going to be an amazing panel of experts, and I'm humbled to be here because you're such much of experts. But first of all, I just have to say something about the World Affairs Council of across the country. You know, when I think about 100 years plus of the work that you've been doing as conveners, as thinkers, as teachers, as thought leaders, it is extraordinary what you do. We at U.S. Global Leadership Coalition you're our #1 partners. Some of you, a lot of you are the ones that when we have ventured outside of the Beltway across the country, you're our #1 stop because you know the communities. You are the ones that we have partnered with. You are our complement as we are the advocates. You are our teachers. You are our partners, and I thank you. I want to share a story. It will not surprise you that my story is about the elections. It starts 20 years ago, surprisingly, and it was a friend of mine came to me with an idea. And the idea was almost 20 years ago, the election of 2008 was the first time in 60 years that there was no president or vice president that was going to be on the national ticket. And he said, is this the election that we could get the candidates to actually talk about foreign policy, because it's not usually about foreign policy, and talk about foreign policy and diplomacy and the importance of diplomacy and development. And I said, that's a great idea. He said, yeah, but I have no idea how to do it. And I said, actually, I've done that before. I think I have an idea to do it. And it started a journey that we've now done at USGLC, 9 election cycles, 5 presidential, to get networks of people like yourself, business leaders, farmers, mayors, faith leaders, NGOs, et cetera, to talk with their candidates running for federal office about why America's role in the world is so important to our kitchen table issues. And it's been an incredible journey. So let's talk about election 2024. We call our initiative Impact 2024. It has been wild. I'll just start with one headline. It was really different than 2 years ago. 2 years ago, when candidates we tried to meet with, we would write a note. Now, remember, we are called the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, and we got notes back 2 years ago that said, I won't meet with you. We're not globalist. But this year, that's not what happened. We had candidates that came to us, and the first thing they said is, I just want to say, we're not isolationists. That's a good change. That was a good change. And a lot of the candidates that we met with, we were the only ones that even talked with them about foreign policy. Some of them knew a lot about foreign policy. They did missionary work. They were veterans. They were in international business. And it's not me sitting here in Washington. It's people that show up at your World Affairs programs that met with them, local communities. So let me give you a few takeaways. They're going to tell you much more about where voters are. I'm going to just tell you a few takeaways that we put out. If you haven't read our analysis, it's on our website. But let me give you a few just to kind of get the conversation. Wesley, what do you think? One, whoever was going to win, he knows this. Whoever is going to win, and it's going to be true, in January, you know this, you're talking about for the whole conference here, it's going to land in January with this huge, huge global threat inbox. So it didn't matter, and it doesn't matter, because they cannot ignore of the 2 wars that are going on, the huge growing humanitarian crisis, the huge competition and rivals that are going out, and we can't ignore them, and we're going to be talking about it, and all of us have to come to the table to make sure that they don't ignore what's going on in the world and deal with it. Second, I think you've noticed President Trump is coming back. And when it comes to foreign policy, as I have been writing and speaking about, I've used the term, it's complicated. Remember that movie? And I'll tell you 2 things to think about. There's 2 parts of this conversation that I've been having. Now, on one hand, on the diplomacy and development list, there were a number of policy things that I think that they did well. Things like creating the Development Finance Corporation. That is a huge part of our new economic toolkit. Ivanka Trump led the it was called WGDP, a Women Economic Empowerment Initiative. The Abraham Accords to lean in on our diplomacy efforts. There was a new journey for self-reliance at USAID. A list goes on. But there's a very huge worry that I lose sleep over, because their first budget was to cut a third of our footprint around the world. But we had a Congress then who in 10 days, 250 members of Congress, both sides of the aisle, that said, nope, that is dangerous, we are not going to accept it. Do I think that will happen next year? That we will have a Congress that will say, no, we're not going to accept what could be a 20, 30, 40% request? No. That is going to be our worry, that we could see enormous requests and proposals to cut from the State Department, USAID, and our other tools. So that's my second takeaway. My third takeaway is that we have a bipartisan Congress that supports engagement in the world. A lot of good friends are retiring, but there's a lot of good friends that are elected and are going to be important on both sides of the aisle, chairs of these key committees that we can talk about. They will certainly talk about. Great friends that are going from the House to the Senate on both sides of the aisle. The fourth thing I will say is the Republicans, interestingly, have shifted their language in terms of America's role in the world. Remember peace through strength, Ronald Reagan? Well, we are seeing not only President Trump's campaign use that language, but I'm seeing more and more of the candidates using that language. Ronald Reagan, peace through strength, everybody thinks about it only around military. Well, under Reagan's administration, it was the highest use of the civilian toolkit as well in terms of dollars. On the campaign trail, last one I'll mention, is that foreign policy, you'll talk about what the voters said, but I will tell you this. Foreign policy came up in all the debates, in the Senate, we watched them all, believe it or not, but campaign ads. There were 1.2 million individual campaign ads in the election. Of those, 0.01%, 5 campaign ads were negative and criticized foreign assistance, Ukraine and others. That's not a big deal, meaning nobody thought that that was going to win them a lot of votes, not to say we don't have a problem. And there's where I'm going to end. We did some polls. Dina is the queen of polling on it, but I'll tell you one poll that I saw. Right before UNGA, we did a poll to just measure where the American voters were. And we saw how absolutely concerned American voters are about how concerned they are about instability in the world. What are they worried about? Our rivals, Iran, China, Russia, North Korea. They know they're out to play to win, and they want America to show up. So what I would leave you with is this thought. This is where we all come in, is to make sure that we tell the story. They're going to tell you how to tell the story, but we tell the story of how to connect the dots. So I just gave you a little flavor of what we're going to end up with here in January. It is not going to be easy. What we need to do is to connect the dots. You said, Mary, ask the question. We always ask, what's it worth? What's it worth to be engaged in the world? And what we have to do is tell the story of why we need to be engaged. What's it worth to our safety? What's it worth to our economy? What's it worth to our health? What's it worth to our values? And connect the dots to our kitchen table issues. And if we do it back at home, we can win and we can make the argument. Thank you very much for inviting me to say a few words. And Dina, over to you.